All right, Pete. Good morning, everyone on the line. So this is a start goal. So this year, our first presenter is Peter Selby. He's the BrAPI coordinator for Excellence Breeding Platform. He's with me in the room at BTI, presenting from Cornell University. So I know a lot of people accepted the meeting notice, and we are recording this webinar, and we will share on public YouTube. So without further ado, Pete, please take on.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, as Star mentioned, I'm the BrAPI coordinator for the BrAPI community and the BrAPI project. So I'll be talking about some of the recent achievements within the BrAPI community, as well as version 2 for BrAPI will be coming out soon. And so I'll be reviewing some of the version 2 updates that are coming out hopefully within the next week. Version 2 will be officially released. So yeah. But first, I like to start every single presentation that I give around BrAPI with this set of slides. And so I apologize if anyone in the room has seen this set of slides before, but I'd just like to give a brief overview about what is BrAPI, get everyone on the same page with the same understanding of what the heck we're talking about. So BrAPI is a standardized RESTful web service API specification for communicating plant breeding data. And so that's quite a mouthful, so we'll break that down a little bit. Starting with what an API is. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. Now, I think we're all very familiar with a user interface or a GUI, graphical user interface. This is something that allows a person to communicate and control a computer program. So allows the user to input data, receive data, and send commands. Very, very similarly, an application programming interface is a way for one application to interface and control another application. So it's one program to send commands, send data, receive data from another computer program. And there's various different flavors of API. But in this case, we're talking about web services. So what is a web service? A web service is a service provided over the web or over any sort of network. For every web service, there are two parties involved. There's a service consumer and a service provider. Sometimes these are shorthanded into the client and the server. And so the client or the service consumer will construct a request. That request will get sent over some network to the server or the service provider. The service provider will take in that request, run it through the service that it has available, produce some response, and send that response back to the client. So with every web service, you can see there's always this loop of a request and a response. This can be tricky to spot sometimes, but there is always this loop. Some examples are, if you're requesting data from a database, then the client will send a request for data. The server will fulfill that request, pull out the necessary data that was asked for, and send the data response back. Another example might be submitting new data to a database, and so the request will contain all the new data that needs to get sent. Request goes to the server, And then the response often is just an acknowledgement that the server received the data and successfully uploaded it to the database. So there's not much of a response, but just an acknowledgement that the job was done. But there's always that request and response cycle. And digging down a little further, what we're talking about is REST. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. REST is a flavor of web service. It's an architectural design built on the HTTP protocol. And so, you know, already very familiar, HTTP is already very familiar to all of us. You know, that's how websites work. That's the common web works. And so REST is just a way of formalizing and making requests and responses with HTTP to communicate between different applications. So when you construct a request, that's going to go to some URL. And generally speaking, when we're talking about REST, we're also talking about JSON. That's not a requirement to be talking about JSON, but generally speaking, when we're talking about REST, we're talking about JSON objects being passed back and forth over the network. Finally, the last two, BrAPI is a standardized specification. This is sort of the important part about BrAPI. And first of all, BrAPI is a standard, and so try and work with the plant breeding community and the various database communities associated with that to come up with this set of community standards for communicating data so that everyone is following, you know, speaking more or less the same language. Everyone's computers and applications, that is, are speaking the same language. And finally, BrAPI is just a specification. So there's no application, there's no program, there's no Docker file that I can send you and say, run this, this is BrAPI. BrAPI is just the specification that defines the standard. And so every partner application, every application that wants to be BrAPI compliant needs to create their own software, their own endpoints to be in compliance with this specification. And there are some shortcuts and there's some libraries that we've developed within the community to help with that. But at the end of the day, BrAPI is just a technical specification which defines these standards. All right, so wanted to run through some highlights for the BrAPI community over the past year or so. So we are now looking at 33 different partner organizations. It's very, very easy to become a partner organization. Basically, someone just has to send me your logo and we put it on the website and then you're a partner. But these are all the organizations that are partners right now have some involvement with the BrAPI community and have contributed something or made their own system compliant. We have about 150 people on the mailing list and within the GitHub community. That number is changing, so I'd say about 150, but it's a really, really good group. Lots of community input, and that's really exciting to see such a big group. And early last year, about a year ago, we finally had publication, the first BrAPI official publication. So we have the BrAPI paper out in the Bioinformatics Journal. And that was very exciting. That was a big community effort, and I'm very happy with how that turned out. These links in the PowerPoint are links back to the paper and to the organization's page, so if anyone's curious. And then late last year, we also set up the BrAPI review board. And this is also very exciting, and it's sort of a change in the paradigm. For the past couple of years, I've sort of acted as the benevolent dictator of the BrAPI project. And that was really what the project needed to get cleaned up and standardized and formalized to the point where people could start using it. And then we started looking at enhancements and how to make the standard better and handle more use cases. And then that's when I really started needing help figuring out what goes into BrAPI, what doesn't go into BrAPI, how do we make this the best standard we could. And so I asked for volunteers to form this review board. And these 7 individuals signed up from a bunch of different institutes, from a bunch of different partner institutes that have all been heavily involved with BrAPI almost since the beginning. And so I'm very excited that these 7 these 7 people and the groups they represent are on board and willing to help. And it's already become useful with the release of version 2. This review board was able to review the specification with their teams and other partners they work with, and came up with a big list of problems that needed to be fixed before version 2 could be released, which is exactly what I was hoping for. And so the version 2 release had to be delayed a little bit, but hoping for a stronger result because of that, and because we were able to catch some of these things ahead of time. All right, so now let's talk about some of the use cases that have been going on recently. I focused on some of the use cases most relevant to EIB. There are a number of other use cases going on. There's lots of different ways that people are using BrAPI, but I just took 3 examples that I wanted to focus on. And the first use case, which I'm actually most excited about, is the KSU Fieldbook app is now BrAPI compliant. And that started with connecting KSU Fieldbook with the Rebase system, and a big shout out to the Breeding Insight team for taking that on and really running with it. So once we had Fieldbook connected with Rebase, and all the authentication and everything set up with that, it was actually very easy to adapt it to other systems. So at the recent BrAPI Hackathon at Corset, a group from BMS was also able to get BMS connected to KSU Fieldbook. They ran into a couple of little snags, just specific things about how data was being handled and sort of differences in data. They're working on those bugs right now, and so I'm really hopeful that we'll have KSU Fieldbook connected to both Rebase and BMS here, within the next few months. And I've also heard from the B4R EBS team. Marco K reached out to me asking about exactly this, and he also set a couple of developers to try and get Fieldbook connected to B4R. I haven't heard back yet on the status of that. I need to reach out to Marco and see sort of where they are with that, but that was also very promising that they're also connecting Fieldbook to B4R. So that's very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of that. The other one that's been around for quite a while is the sort of automated sample management use case, being able to send sample data to a genotyping lab and to a genotyping database, and sort of connect all these systems in some sort of automated fashion so that we stop emailing Excel files back and forth to each other. This one is much more complicated, and so it's taking a little bit longer to get to a finished place. I can say that on the lab side, on the genotyping lab side, we have both DART and Cornell have their systems fully compliant with the BrAPI spec, and they're just waiting for a client to connect. On the genotyping database side, GOBii is nearly finished with the version 2 APIs that they needed to connect a lot of this data. Been facing some troubles with the sample management side of things and the client sending this data. Once BrAPI version 2 is finally released and all the things are wrapped up around that, I will have some free time, and I'm going to try and focus on this use case and get more people excited and involved about it, and try and push this one forward a little bit to get it finished. But yeah, still very exciting that we've got 2 out of the 3 pieces pretty much ready to go for this. So. And the last one I'd just like to highlight is this idea of BrAPs. So if anyone hasn't heard of BrAPs, this was a brainchild of Lucas Mueller, and he he ran into my office one day, as Lucas does. He ran into my office and said, "We need BrAPs," and then ran away again. Said, "Lucas, what the heck are you talking about?" And so that's sort of the start of this idea of making these little apps that are standalone and BrAPI compliant. And so I've got 6 on the screen here. There are several more that are on the way that I'm going to be posting on the BrAPI.org BrAPs library. And the idea with these is because they're standalone and open source, any project can take them, download them, import them, straight as, most of these are JavaScript apps, so you can import them straight as JavaScript apps or copy them and add them to your own site. Most of the ones on here right now are visualization type tools, but one of the ones I'm excited about, Noel just finished a couple months ago, was a plot layout tool so that you can actually drag plot layouts across Google Map images, and that all that information gets pushed back to the database with BrAPI. So that's very exciting, and I'll hope to get that one up soon. But yeah, we've had some good success with these, and being able to share these different tools and visualizations across the different applications. And it makes them very, very easy to get new functionality into a system that somebody else has already developed. And sort of illustrates a different way to use BrAPI also. Everyone's thinking of BrAPI as a way to communicate information across systems, but you can also move applications between systems because the applications speak the same language. And so you can, instead of moving the data between applications, you can actually just move tools between applications, and they'll connect to the internal data the same way. So yeah, I'm very excited about the BrAPS library. All right, so looking at BrAPI version 2, first I'll mention that version 1.3 has been stable since November 2018, which is very exciting. So that's already well over a year. And so with version 2, tried to, well, there's several new things added, some new endpoints for submitting data. That was a big hole that was missing in 1.3, being able to push data back to a database. There's a whole new genotyping schema, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a new searching mechanism, which was important because no one was really happy with the 1.3 searching mechanism. Sort of reorganized BrAPI into different modules. So there's now 4 different BrAPI modules that break out the number of endpoints and make it a little bit easier to work with. And there was just a lot of cleanup and removing of old interfaces. BrAPI version 1 had a lot of history and a lot of baggage with it, and so it was really nice to just be able to have a clean slate and take all the lessons we learned from version 1 and implement them across the board as a standard in version 2. So I'm very excited about that. So these are the new version 2 modules. So we have BrAPI Core, which has some trial management things as well as some other core pieces of the API. So this looks at things like programs, trials, studies, locations, people, and lists. We also have BrAPI Germplasm, which looks at everything germplasm related. So these are germplasm, attributes, seed lots, crosses, pedigrees, and progeny. BrAPI Phenotyping, which is looking at classical phenotyping. So we have observation units, observations, variables, traits, scales, methods, and images. And the BrAPI Genotyping module, I'll go through this list. It involves samples, markers, variant sets, variants, call sets, calls, references, reads, and vendor orders. Something I wanted to call out here with the genotyping. This is the totally restructured BrAPI genotyping. In version 1, the genotyping calls within BrAPI were sort of a mix of different groups finding different solutions the way they needed things to work at the time, which is fine. It gave us a bunch of different use cases to work with and try and some requirements to figure out. But we really needed to follow some standard, a standard vocabulary to start, and then some standard data structures after that. And so we actually turned to, can go take a look at that. We turned to something called the Ga4GH spec, which I will pull up here. So this is the Ga4GH is a group that was actually focusing on human genetics, but they developed this standard called the Variance API. And after speaking to these guys for a little bit and getting their permission, I blatantly stole their API and mixed it in, tweaked a few things to get it to fit with the rest of BrAPI. But this is the general model for the Ga4GH Variance API. You have a variance set, which represents the entire allele matrix. You have a variant, which represents a single row, row within the matrix, associated to a marker of some kind. A call set, which represents a column within the matrix, which is associated with a sample of some kind. And then each individual allele call is just called a call. So yeah, I mean, I encourage people to go take a look at this model if you have additional questions or anything like that. But yeah, for BrAPI version 2, we're moving to the Ga4GH variance model for all the genotyping side of things. And I think so far it's working out fairly well. Like I mentioned before, the GOBii team is working on their version 2 implementation of the BrAPI genotyping model, which is exactly this, and it seems to be going well. Then I think looking at, oh yeah, just looking at the specification tour to this. All right, so this is BrAPI.org. If anyone has not seen BrAPI.org, I encourage you to check it out. This is where everything BrAPI related is stored, all the links to everything, all community events, everything starts here. And so if we go to the BrAPI specification page, we can take a look at, there's all the different, there's some general reference documentation down at the bottom, all the different versions for version 1, and the links to all the documentation here. And then the version 2 documentation here. And as you can see, we have those same 4 modules split out. I won't dig too far into the technical documentation here, just wanted to give sort of a tour of this page and that it exists. We also have several places where the documentation is copied. So if you're really hardcore and you like reading raw YAML files, you can go check out the documentation on GitHub. It's automatically copied to these other documentation presentation platforms, which are a little bit better and easier to read. So we have Apiary, which I will open up here. And within Apiary, you'll see this page. Again, all those links to the general reference documentation. Again, a set of links to all the different BrAPI modules and their different documentation pages. And then a list of all the different endpoints and documentation around those endpoints. And if you click on one of these, so this is get common crop names. This is a way of just getting what crops are available on the system. You'll see something like this with a mock URL, what input parameters are necessary, the example response body, so you can read through the JSON for the example response, any potential error responses that could come back. Yeah, and you just have all of these different endpoints available within the API page to go read the documentation and look up what the specification is. We also have Swagger Hub, which it's all the same information. It's all copied from the same place. Swagger Hub provides a slightly more, so where Apiary is more user-friendly and English-heavy, where you can read more, Swagger Hub is more technically focused. So I will just hide the YAML there. So this is what the Swagger Hub page looks like. Again, all the different links to the different modules. And we can open, let's open the same one, the common crop names here. We can see this is all the same information, but slightly more technically focused. There's the try it out button, so you can actually send a request straight from this page to an example dummy server and play around with it, get some data back. Again, we see the example JSON here, as well as if we click on schema, we can see the schema layout, JSON schema layout, with some additional documentation in there. So I won't go through all this. There's I'm forgetting the math. There's almost 200 different API calls in BrAPI now, so I won't go through all of them. But I'm always available for questions, phone calls to walk people through this if they need. I should mention, one other cool advantage of using Swagger Hub is they have this export button up here. And so you can export the documentation and download the API in a variety of different formats, but these two are really the more interesting ones. You can download a client library in a variety of different languages, and it will just read the specification here and generate the code for a client library in all these different languages, as well as a server stub in a bunch of different languages as well. So if you are starting a new client or a new project and you want it to be able to talk to BrAPI, check here first to see if it will auto-generate the necessary code and model objects and service classes and everything in the language you're interested in. And then that it just removes a lot of the busy work of having to type all that stuff by, code all that stuff by hand. And yeah, I think that is it. Thank you everyone for your time, and I can take some questions now.
Thank you very much, Pete. So now you can unmute yourself to follow up on comments or questions. So while people are thinking of their questions, I have a couple of questions. Pete?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for the excellent update. Very exciting to see in short time the publications, also use cases in the community. So my first question is, do you have some feedback from the breeding community in terms of using the Fieldbook? Now the Fieldbook with Rebase are connected with the API of BrAPI.
I think it's a little soon to tell. That connection with Rebase has not yet gone into production service yet. It's available and they're testing it, but it hasn't really gone out into production yet. But from the few people who have used it and started testing it and playing around with it, it's so much easier than the old way of using Fieldbook, where you had to download an Excel file, get it onto your mobile device, upload it into the app, and then reverse that whole process to get the data back. So the people who played around with it and tested it have heard very positive things, that it's just so much easier to use. But it hasn't really gone into production yet, so we don't know from the general community.
I saw teams on the line. I know during the PAG in San Diego, there was very successful participation in their training.
Yes, I unfortunately missed that training, so I don't know how that went. But yeah, that was very cool to see.
Tim, do you want to say a couple of words regarding that? Yeah, if not, I have another question. In terms of the sample management tool, I understand for sample tracker, because we're switching to the EBS sample manager, but how about the other one, the Rebase sample tracking tool? What's the main things? There are not a lot of programs or activities yet. What's the BrAPI integration?
So I think it is just sort of a lack of there hasn't really been anyone pushing this project forward, and this sort of I don't want to say a lack of a need for it, but it just hasn't been everyone's top priority recently. There have been other priorities, and then there was when was that? The last time I was at CIMMYT, oh, that was October. That was for the EIB Module 5 meeting. I gave a little demonstration of a dummy app that I developed just to represent, to show people what was possible, and everyone in the room got pretty excited about that. So it sort of added some fuel to the fire a little bit, and people got more excited to push this forward. So there was actually talk about turning what I had started to build into a BrAP, and so that it could be shared with Rebase and BMS and potentially Sample Tracker. There were some complications with doing that, but just to have some code written that handled the handshake between all the different applications automatically, and so that not everyone didn't have to implement that separately in their own tools. So there's been some discussion around that. Again, with all the version 2 stuff, I haven't really had time to pursue that at all or push that forward, but I'm hoping with once version 2 goes out, I'll have a little bit of free time to start pushing that forward.
Yeah, so tied up with that, we want to give a little bit of update on the hackathon with Corset or last week here, or anything related to the issues in terms of sample tracking use cases.
Sure. I mean, I can give a small update. So with every BrAPI hackathon, I always do a write-up after the fact. Due to extended travel and illness, I haven't been able to get to that one yet for the hackathon at Corset. So this week I'll be writing up the report for that one. I think that hackathon went really well. Saw a bunch of progress with some of the tools at Corset. They have some dashboarding tools. I mentioned BMS was there. They were getting the Fieldbook connection set up. Grzegorz from Dart was there, and he was able to sit down with Morella from Rebase, and I don't think they got much coding done, but they were able to sort of talk out what the pattern would look like and how to communicate between Rebase and Dart. So that was a step forward. And similarly, I think the BMS guys sat in on that conversation as well, so they had a good idea of how that connection could be made.
The database, or more like the app, the QC, or the genetic map across different databases?
We're talking samples, so communication of samples between databases.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there was, as you mentioned, there was also the hackathon last week here at Cornell. That was a more focused hackathon. We had some visitors from Japan, the University of Tokyo, and a private company called ListenField, and had a bunch of representatives here from both of those organizations. That also went really well with the time we had. We had some limited time with them, unfortunately, but I think it was productive, and it was a good start for the connection between some of their both the University of Tokyo and ListenField. They collaborate together pretty heavily, but they're doing a lot of genomic selection, GWAS, and sort of general analysis tools, but they need help with database tools, and so there was some good conversations on how to connect some of their analysis applications with the Rebase database and try and figure out how to talk back and forth. And I believe also we got tried to get a connection set up between GOBii and their database as well. So yeah. So that all went really well with the time we had as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Any questions from people on the line? You can unmute yourself. Okay, so if not, thank you so much, Pete. And you have Pete's contact. We'll share the slides, also recording. You can follow up through Slack. And also there are many documentations you can browse to follow up on the questions. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Have a good day now, everyone. Bye.